And moralities have changed over time. Professor Baker identified this as a famous argument. It is a famous argument. It's a famous bad argument. And in fact, let me tell you why. You cannot get from the observation that different people have different points of views about things, whatever those things happen to be, or the observation that some people believed one thing at one time and then believed another thing at another time, and therefore conclude that there is no right answer to the questions that are being asked. That, my friends, is a non sequitur, and that is incoherent. It simply doesn't follow that because people change their minds or have varied beliefs, that morals are relative. First, you have to assume that morals are relative, that there is no objective morality, and then you might say, gee, that might explain why all of these people seem to disagree. But only when you assume what you're trying to prove to begin with. That's backwards. When you look at morality, there are particular things about it that stand out for us, that we pay attention to, and we see just like we see each other here. Rationality is much the same. Incidentally, if it turns out that it's a good argument that because people have changed their views over time on morality, or people have different views currently about morality, that therefore there is no answer with regards to morality, that becomes a very powerful argument against science. Because the exact same set of conditions apply to science. People have many varied views about scientific issues. That doesn't mean that nobody's right or you can't find the answer. People had different views in the past than they do in the present. They've changed their mind. In fact, this is famous that these paradigms of reality from the scientific perspective have changed over time. Does this mean that science is a fruitless enterprise? Does this mean that there's nothing to discover? That everything is relative? That you do your little scientific endeavors to suit your particular and peculiar needs in your culture, and you do yours, but there's no unanimity. There's no truth of the matter with regards to the physical universe. Of course, this doesn't follow at all. And so we've been given, as far as I could tell, two actual arguments against objectivism. One is that the idea is incoherent, that there's one true morality. I don't see how that follows, and you can judge for yourself. The second one is, because there are differences of opinion, then morality must be relative, and that doesn't follow either. That is not a sound argument. What I have done is I've just asked you to look with a certain set of senses at circumstances and make your own conclusions. I have pointed to the thing itself. Strictly speaking, I haven't argued for it. Just like I'm not arguing for the existence of this lectern, I am simply pointing at it and asking you if you can see it. And if you can see it, that ought to be enough to convince you that it exists. Now, there might be some people who are a little fuzzy and they need glasses, or maybe they're not looking right, or some people that are blind, but that's not enough for us to say that we are not justified in believing this lectern exists. And by the same token, I am asking you to look at certain circumstances and tell me what you make of this. Do you see something happening here morally that is real and true and is above our own mere opinions, our feelings, our conventions, and above our cultural constructions? I think that the answer to that is yes, and I suspect that you do as well. Thank you very much.
Sorry to be a technological pain. I want to give you the little argument that I referred to earlier, the argument from Aquinas. There are actually three arguments that are best thought of as running together. There's the argument from diversity, which I briefly waved my hand at. There's the argument from queerness, first stated by David Hume in the 17th century, restated in the mid-70s by John Mackey, and much discussed then. And then there's the third argument, the projection argument.
Can you speak up, please?
Oops, I've never in my life been asked to speak up. No, that's no criticism of you. I have a very, very loud voice, and people are usually complaining about my loud voice. Can everyone hear? I apologize. Is that okay now? I want to bend down so that I can look at my computer. Can everyone hear me now? Thank you. And thank you for telling me. These three arguments, clearly Greg is quite right that by itself the argument from diversity doesn't work. Obviously, the mere existence of diversity doesn't show that there isn't a single correct morality. But when you run it with the reasons you gave, but when you run it with the queerness argument and one other little thing, the projection argument, then you get a very powerful worry. So here's the queerness argument. Greg wants to say that there are objective moral truths. Now, if you think what that means, then, and I think I'm not being unfair to what he said, it's an absolutely standard account of what objective moral truths would look like, then there are objective moral facts, and these categorically and objectively give people reasons to act or refrain from acting in various ways. So they give them reasons to act this way, whether or not they like it, whether or not they know about the moral fact, and they give these reasons quite independently of what the people believe about the reasons. That's the standard interpretation of what it is for there to be an objective moral truth and an objective moral fact. So that is, they give people reasons to act or refrain, whether or not people have any particular attitudes, desires, or beliefs. And they give people such reasons, whether anyone believes the moral facts. There's the first three steps. Now, imagine that M, any M you like, is some objectively existing moral fact, like that it's wrong to cause unnecessary pain, or that everyone has equal rights, anything like this. Imagine that a person A is in a situation but either doesn't believe that it's a fact, or doesn't like it that it's a fact, or it's simply not aware that it's a fact. Then, since M is an objectively existing fact, A nevertheless has a categorically binding objective reason to do the act called for by the fact. That's what we said when we're saying that there exist objective moral truths. Just drawing out an implication of what Greg's saying. Now, there's an old theory that goes back at least 300 or 400 years, and it is very, very plausible. And the theory is stated in step 7 of this argument, that a person has a reason to do an act in a situation only if either that person wants to do the act, or there's something that doing the act will produce, or be constitutive of, or is a means to. This is usually referred to as reason internalism.